Good morning.
Good morning.
Great day to be here. Beautiful outside. Lovely weather. We're all feeling fine, aren't we? I said we're all feeling fine, aren't we?
Yes.
Good. I've been through what you are going through at this point in time. My heart event was just over 4 years ago. I've done the program. I've been through all the different elements that Michelle has just gone through here. From the lows, and I mean lows, including the suicidal thoughts. I'm not worth it. What am I doing here? Why did I survive? And that's a big one. Why did I survive? There are people who'll come out and they'll think that they're worse afterwards than they were before they had the heart attack. And you'll go through a period of, some of you will go through a period, I did anyway, of denial, not wanting to believe what happened to me. And the effects on not just me but my wife can be somewhat catastrophic at times. But what I'll do is just give you a bit of a background. I was 54 when I had my heart attack. I thought I was fit, I thought I was healthy, but I learned a lot of things as a result of my heart attack. And if this is going to work, sometimes these things, I bring my own these days. To get to where I am now, I had to work out where I was at the time of my heart attack. And I think this is a self-assessment process that most of us have to go through. We really can't begin to improve on how we are after our heart event or any serious illness unless we recognise what we were doing possibly wrong at the time. And I came up with something a couple of years ago doing these talks. Made up words, SEDAC. And SEDAC for me would stand for stress. I'm a teacher by training, that's why my writing's so bad. Exercise, diet, alcohol, and ciggies. I had to be able to identify in my own mind what was I doing right and what was I doing wrong in terms of this, to then begin to change my lifestyle. As Michelle said, changing lifestyle is a biggie after a heart event. And I started to look at this and I said to myself, uh-oh, I fail on 4 out of 5 of those categories. At the time of my heart attack, big stressor, always have been, always will be. Background, I had a marriage failure a number of years ago. At the time it was about 14 years ago. It's a marriage breakdown I didn't want. Had 6 children, it cost me that. So I lived with that and still do to this day. Stress, at the time of my heart attack I was a courier, working on the road. I wasn't teaching, I was working as a courier, 12 hours on the road. Anyone who drives on the road these days knows what sort of pressure you're on. Exercise. Well, I was a courier, so I thought I was doing my exercise every day. In and out the van, 12 hours a day, picking up, carrying. I learned here that what I was doing was really just an activity, and exercise is something that you need to do on a constant basis, usually at least 10 to 15 minutes of constant movement to get this part of your body going, your cardiovascular system, your heart and lungs. But I thought I was doing my exercise being a courier. Diet. Hello, I'm a courier. How well am I going to eat on the road 12 hours a day? My wife would pack me in the morning fresh vegetables and fruit, but if I left home at 6 o'clock, by 10 o'clock that was all gone. Now I never got home much before 6:30 at night. So what am I going to be eating the rest of the day? Takeaway. So for 6 days a week, 6.5 days sometimes, my diet was pretty poor. Alcohol. Only thing I'd never did wrong. I've never been a drinker. I'd have a social beer when I had a barbecue or something like that, but alcohol was never an issue for me. Ciggies. Time of the heart attack, 40, 50 a day. had been smoking for 33 years. Possibly in isolation, I may have avoided a heart attack. In total combination, I was a heart attack waiting to happen. And I had to face reality. This is it. I had to look at that, and this didn't happen overnight, believe me. It happened over a period of time, which I'll come to. But when I did realise this, I realised that I had to acknowledge this and put into action some sort of change, some sort of plan. And today, I live with my stress, but I try and manage it. How do I try and manage it? When I'm feeling anxious, or low, or blue, or depressed, or any of those sort of terminologies, I'll go out and do a bit more exercise. I'll try and do half an hour to an hour's exercise a day, just walking. I bought gadgets, an exercise bike and all of that sort of crap. It didn't work for me. And I think this is the essential part of any rehabilitation or recovery program. The people here are great. They are fantastic. I cannot speak highly enough about them. They'll introduce you to techniques and mechanisms and methods and ways and plans and what have you to help you get your lives back together. But we have to pick what's best for us. Someone might love the rowing machine and can spend hours on it each day on a rowing machine. I can barely get down. I'm just physically inept when it comes to that. For me, walking, I just do simple walking around the house. Nothing complicated about that. I bought the machine and I sold the machine on eBay. Don't need it, didn't need it. So I do walking, exercise, diet. I eat a lot less now. I lost nearly 10 kilo from when I had my heart attack to earlier this year. I've put it all back on, I'll come back to that in a moment. But I found that by managing my stress and doing regular exercise, eating properly, I was able to get my weight back down to not the ideal target weight that the dietitian wanted, which was at that time about 80 to 82 kilo, but I got back down to about 85, 86, from around 94, 95 at the time of the heart attack. And what that meant was I was taking away the excess weight baggage on the heart and lungs, which means my heart was able to work less, under less pressure, if you know what I mean. Alcohol, I still have my half a dozen beers a year. I don't care about that. The big one, 40, 50 cigarettes a day. Smoking for 33 years. Haven't had one since the night of the heart attack. So I can tell you, you can quit if you have to. You just need a bit of motivation. Heart attack was my motivation. But all of this didn't happen overnight. The first 6 months after my heart attack was probably the blackest, darkest time of my life. As I said, I came here and I was doing a wonderful rehabilitation program. When I came here, my mind was not here. I came here because my wife and my mother had flown up from Sydney, who was then going into her 80s. I wouldn't use the word forced me, but encouraged me to become part of this program, to join this program. You've got to remember, at this time it's a month, because I think most of you start a month. Well, I did a month after my surgery. By the way, I had a major heart attack, came out of the blue, didn't know it was coming. I was making the bed with my wife. Resulted in 29 resuscitations, which alone I shouldn't have survived. A blockage on the right side, 3 stents put in. Stabilised up here at Gold Coast. Had to hang around there for a few days because I was unstable to be moved up to PA. And at PA, I was going to have a quad, but they decided to leave the right side alone because the stents were doing okay, and just did a triple on the left side. You've all met Rachel here?
Yeah.
Well, Rachel was one of my cardiac nurses, so I have a particular affinity to Rachel. She was in the transport that helped get me from here up to there for the bypass. Lovely person. Cannot speak more highly enough about Rachel. But when I came here when Sharon was running the place. Have you met Sharon? No, you won't, because she's, as people do, they tend to move up. So she's now upstairs, I think, on the 6th floor. I came here, and on the first session, as most of you would have done, they did what they call an assessment to see where you're at. I came here with the most negative thoughts. I was here because I didn't want to be here. I was 54, and I was watching some of the older people around. One lady I'd actually met in somewhere else, but there was one lady, there were a couple of people in their 70s and early 80s, and they were walking around quite sprightly. And I walked in, and I don't know how many of you have had the zipper were opened up. How fit and able did you feel those first few weeks afterwards in terms of mobility and carrying yourself quite normal? I don't know about you, but I was like a little old man. All that was missing was the A-frame. And there I was walking in there, 54 years of age, and I'm watching this 74 or 75-year-old lady sprightly doing the circuits, as you do the circuits around here now. I was at the Life Centre at Broadbeach, it was a different setup, and I just lost it. I just broke down. I could not cope. I could not cope at home as it was, looking at my scars, and I certainly could not cope coming into a rehab centre thinking that, look how bad I am compared to all these older people, 20 years, 30 years older than me. I didn't know at the time that this is like an ongoing program where anyone can come in at week 1 for one person, but it could be week 8 or week 9 or week whatever for the next person. I didn't know that the little old lady that was walking around was doing her last week of rehab, and therefore had been through everything that I'd been through, and I was coming in on week 1 in probably the most precarious and open situation. And I just couldn't cope. Cut a long story short, Sharon was able to counsel me, and I went home and I swore I'm never coming back. But my wife had other ideas, and I was back the next session, the next Tuesday or Thursday, whatever it was. The point is, at that point in time, I really was low. Michelle mentioned mortgage. I was working as a courier 6.5 days a week, and I was earning a reasonable income, well over $1,000, close to $1,500 on some weeks. We had a mortgage. Out the window. Out the window. There's no way I could go back to driving immediately, and because of my diabetes I couldn't go back long term, let alone short term. Issue of mortgage. We're told eliminate stress after a heart attack. Anxiety, you betcha. Had to start worrying about, within the first 2 months of my heart attack, what are we going to do with the house? Then we got ripped off by a real estate agent. Another story for another day. But there were all these pressures coming on to me. In January, February, I decided to go back to tech and do a Teach English as a Second Language course, a TESOL course. And that got me into a more positive environment, which is what I think you were talking about, trying to get away from the negatives and trying to get into something more positive. So I started doing a bit of teaching. I'm also an eBay teacher, so I did a bit of eBay teaching. But I was still having a lot of negative thoughts about long-term worthwhileness. I was then asking May to do an interview with the Bulletin, and that was probably the biggest eye-opener for me. For the first time, someone wanted to hear my story, and then I learnt that I had something to contribute. During my recovery, I learnt that, because I don't know about you, but I had absolutely no symptoms when it came to my heart attack. Absolutely none. And then I learned afterwards that diabetics don't necessarily have any symptoms, any of the classic symptoms or anything. And that became like a crusade for me. And wherever I go now, and I'm now involved with the Heart Foundation, I'm now a volunteer patient at Bond University, and these are the positive things. It took a period of negativity and then self-realization to understand that I can still contribute. Maybe not as what I wanted to do 5 or 6 years ago, but in my way, I've gone back to teaching. I love coming here every 6 weeks to try and share with people. I got involved with birds and helping my wife with rescuing and rehabbing injured birds and wildlife. I went back and taught myself digital photography. I hadn't touched photography for 40 years since high school. I've had some photos published in the Bulletin on the internet and the hardcover copy. I've gotten involved with, as I said, with wildlife and other support groups on the internet. I'm not very big on going around to coffee clubs, but I love interacting on the internet. So I think I've got a story to tell, and I hear other people, and I help give some support to other people going through what we've been going through. So what I'm saying here is that if you used to play golf and hadn't played golf for many years, go back to playing golf. Don't play your 18 holes. Start off with only 5 or 6. Same with tennis, gardening, crocheting, knitting, whatever. If there's something you haven't done for a number of years, now's the time to get back into it. At the end of the day, and you have to bear with me because I still have issues with respiratory problems as a result of my heart attack, but it doesn't bother me anymore. I live with it. At the end of the day, if you can recognise the things that have affected you and got you to this stage, unfortunately here, it's all going to be up here to overcome those and to turn it round. Michelle and Rachel and Sharon and Anne and Grant and all the other people here will put you and show you the path, but as Michelle over here said on the slideshow, they can't tell you what to do. They can show you what can possibly help you, and you really got to do it for yourselves. And I just know running out of time is a few things that I've learned since my heart attack is that when I go to the dentist, I must tell the dentist, and you need to tell your dentist that you've had a heart issue, especially if you had open heart surgery. You may or may not be aware, but many dentists now want you to take an antibiotic before you have any surgery, any dental surgery, oral surgery. That's the quickest way to get an infection into the heart through the bloodstream, through the mouth, and through prosthesis. Michelle talked about the Medicare programs and getting assistance, 12 or 10 or whatever it's going to be. There's also something called the healthcare plan. If you have a chronic illness, like in my case, the heart and diabetes, you can get 5, I think it is, or 6 subsidised visits to a dietitian, a physiologist. In my case, I go to a podiatrist, which means I don't pay the full whack. I just pay a gap or a minimal amount. One of the important things that I found is in my mobile phone, I now put under ICE, in case of emergency, in the address book, 3 contacts, being my wife, my brother, and my home landline number. God forbid I fall down and get injured. Paramedics these days are taught to look at mobile phones to see if there's a listing for ICE in case of emergency. Is that clear what I've just said there?
Yeah.
It's an internationally known thing. It's been around now for about 5 or 6 years, if not a bit longer. And it's only now being spoken about a lot more here in Australia. I carry a list of medications with me in my wallet in a smaller fashion because I've got heaps of different medications because I've got a number of issues. I do suggest if you can get around to it on the computer, just make up a list. You can make it smaller and I keep it in my wallet. Same reason, something happens to me, they'll look at the phone and they'll also look at your wallet for identity and sometimes now for medications or illnesses. There are medical identity bracelets that you can also get if that's what you'd like to do. And the other thing is, when you were discharged, you were probably given a folder or something that looks like that. This is what I was given. I keep this near the front door. Again, when my wife goes out to work and I'm home alone, if something happens and I have to call for an ambulance, I want them to be able to find my history or what's happened to me quite easily. A few simple things. I know it's going on 11 o'clock, but I'm happy to entertain a few questions if you'd like to ask anything. Otherwise, I can only wish you all the best with your recovery.
Thank you.
Did you say that diabetics don't have heart attacks?
What I'm saying is that diabetics do not necessarily have the classic symptoms.
Oh, I see.
Like left arm, chest pain, back pain, jaw pain, heavy sweating, whatever.
Right.
And I've found that out a lot more over the years since my heart attack when I give these talks.
Right.
There are times when I've had groups here, sometimes it can be 15 or 20 people, and I can watch the nodding heads. And then I ask them afterwards, because I started off sometimes a bit different. I had no symptoms. People nod their heads and I said, oh, I bet you're a diabetic, diabetic. And more often than not, the indications are yes. But you don't have to be a diabetic not to have symptoms. There are some other people that don't have symptoms either.
Oh, thank you.
One of the things I'm involved with is Bond Uni is a volunteer patient. They have a volunteer patient program which I cannot speak highly enough. And talking to the second and third year students about these sort of issues, it's so important because everyone seems to grow up with these fixed ideas that we've been taught. If you're having a heart attack, you're going to have left arm tingling, heavy pressure up here, and maybe heavy sweating. And that's what I was brought up with. That's why at the time of my heart attack, my wife thought it was my ulcer bursting because I'm on medication for a bad stomach ulcer. But she saw things in my physiology, in my body, in my face, apart from the fact that I was turning white, that told her what was happening was not my ulcer, it was something else, but we couldn't work it out what, so we called the ambulance. Okay. Last thing is, if you ever have any questions, talk to the staff here. They're fantastic. And they can give you direction for ongoing assistance after you've finished the program. And I'm pretty sure when they move to Robina next year, they're looking to extend the program and the availability of the equipment to graduates of the cardiac rehab unit.
Are they going to stay here as well, or just be at Robina?
I don't want to be quoted, but I don't believe so. The talk has now been for 2 years to move to Robina, as Robina developed, which it has now finally. But I think the facilities there will be a lot
further away too.
Well, again, it's going to depend on where you live, but the fact that they're going to have a dedicated session area and be able to set up their stuff permanently, and they're going to be able to offer a lot more to a lot more people in the community, because at the moment they're restricted, just physically restricted by, you can see what they've got here to offer, and the fact that the rooms have to be shared. Look, I look at it this way: the paramedics save you, the doctors put you back together, but these are the guys that get you ready to go back and live on your own back out in society. It's a three-pronged attack, and all are important in their own way. But the mind games, this is what these people play with, and they help you get over those mind games.
Thank you very much.
Okay. I'll hang around a few moments if anyone wants to have a chat.
If I'm not holding anyone up, I'll just tell you a bit of my experience. I had a stent 10 years ago, and at that time the statistics showed that in the first 6 months after you had a stent, you could have trouble with a blood clot forming. If you got through the first 6 months, second 6 months you had the possibility of scar tissue blocking again. So I was concerned in that 12 months, and then in the next 6 months I gradually got to forget about it, and I've never thought about it since.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's, and as regard to exercise, they told me to walk 3 kilometres a day. I had the stent in May and I was walking in June, and my eyes would water with the cold and my nose would be running. So we were both ballroom dancers, so we went back to ballroom dancing. That was only 2 nights a week. So to get up more exercise, we then joined rock and roll for the first time in our lives.
Right.
And to cut a long story short, where we go Thursday night to dance, there's 150 people, all acquaintances of ours. I rang the boss up every day while she was in hospital here. He put it out in an email, and 150 people knew that night what stage she was at. And so she hasn't had any depression or anything. She was upset that she had to have a heart attack, but it's not worrying her now.
No, it's very important. I can't just make one final comment on what you said about the stents, and this happened to me 2 weeks ago. I was having reflux issues. As I said in my talk that I've had an ongoing stomach ulcer issue. My GP, whom I only just started seeing early this year, because being in one of those clinics you tend to get rotated around, he said, stop taking your aspirin and stop taking my Plavix, which is one of my heart tablets.
Yeah,
and I'm saying to myself as I'm leaving to my wife, because she'd actually come to that appointment, I don't feel comfortable with this, because I remember when I left hospital, and I see my cardiologist he said, there's 2 medications you're going to be on for the rest of your life. One is the Plavix, which in my case is Iscavar, and the other one is Avapro. So this happened on the Thursday. So Friday morning I emailed my cardiologist, because I do those sort of things. I'd rather be told don't worry than not do something. Friday, so I stopped taking the Iscavar for 3 days. Monday morning he emailed me back and said, you can stop your aspirin, but whatever you do, you don't stop the Plavix, the Iscavar. So what Michelle was saying about sometimes going to the psychiatrist to get the medication as opposed to your GP is 150% correct. When it comes to your heart medications, in my opinion, the GP is exactly that. A be-all, a jack of all trades, but certainly not a specialist in any one of them. When it comes to heart meds being amended or changed or dropped, I would be always going to my cardiologist and saying, look, just tell me it's okay. If it's okay, fine, I'll do it. If it's not okay, not fine, I won't do it. And that happened to me 2 weeks ago. And I only say that because you mentioned about stents blocking, because he said exactly that. That Iscavar's exactly for that reason, to stop those stents from something happening, blockaging. Okay.
Thank you.
Not that means crazy or what it is, but it's a run.